John Hallman's he's a longtime friend of the Tea Party Network for sure. I remember going up to the Capitol with Paul Henry for the first time and completely lost and completely clueless. And we ran into John Hallman, and he was so helpful in helping us navigate the waters of the Capitol, teaching us about the different speakers and the committees and who to go to, and even helping facilitate meetings with these individual legislators. So I consider him a very good friend to the Tea Party Network and to me and Paul. He's an active, longtime voice in all levels of Florida politics and is a veteran of advocating issues of liberty in the Florida legislature. He has also served as a state director for Freedom Works, the Pro-Freedom Market Organization, as well as deputy director of Florida Stop Lawsuit Abuse. While in Tallahassee, John has represented such groups as the Florida Taxpayer Union, Cut Property Taxes Now, the Second Amendment Coalition of Florida, the Florida Campaign for Liberty, and the Liberty First Network. Besides his work in Tallahassee, John also serves on the leadership team of the Liberty Empowerment Institute. John teaches activist training schools, is a frequent guest on radio talk shows, and has written numerous articles promoting the cause of individual liberty. Let's give him a warm welcome, please.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Everybody awake? Oh, good. Catherine had asked me to come and kind of go through we'll call it the legislative process, basically how bills move or don't move, and some of the landmines that come across. I also call it a day in the life of John Hallman and Paul Henry. Some of the things I'll talk about we have to deal with every day when they're in session. So, but just real briefly, I started, as Catherine mentioned, I was the state director of Freedom Works. Actually, it was called Citizens for Sound Economy at the time, became Freedom Works later. And I got the privilege of working for them for several years. And we would take a group up to the Capitol. I'd never been to Tallahassee going back to 2002. And so we would I led groups up there, and I was amazed. So for a couple of years, I was going up there a little bit, and the lobbyists that are up there and the control that these lobbyists have. I mean, every bill that's written is probably 99% chance written by a lobbyist or a special interest group. So all the bills are being written by lobbyists and special interest groups, and they're all for bigger government, handouts, regulations that favor their business and hurts other businesses. It's all about, for their own personal interest, money, handouts, corporate welfare. They just go on and on and on. Florida forever in this binge of buying conservation land. It just keeps going on and on. And so what I felt like, there's 3,000 lobbyists. They're all for bigger government. I said, well, maybe there should be a lobbyist up here that's here full time that can at least be a voice of limited government and the United States Constitution. My feeling is that the primary, if not the only duty of the Florida legislature is to protect us from the federal government exceeding their constitutional authority. That's their only purpose in my view. When they sit up there and go, I'm here to... So when they say they're here, I'm here to protect you people, you need me to protect you. I went, no, that's not your job, sir, ma'am. It's not your job. Protect us from the excesses of the federal government. That's the way the founders set it up. That's your only job. And so they hear that from me a lot and from Paul. So anyhow, I'll run you through the bill process, things that happen along the way. A lot of you know a lot of this already because I've talked to many of you, and you really have gotten really good tracking bills and kind of knowing some of the inside stuff. So some of this you may already know, but let me go through it. Some of them are kind of like little inside secrets and things that I've learned in 11 years. They say you get smarter as you make a lot of mistakes. So that makes me pretty smart because I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. I've learned what works and what doesn't work. So let's get started. On average, there are about 2,000 bills between the House and the Senate filed every year. So this is sort of a warning, and I break this every year. You know, it's like somebody asked me, out of the 2,000 bills, how many of them are bad or anti-liberty? And I said, probably, if not all, most of them. Most of the 2,000 bills will destroy liberty in some way. Not all, there's some good ones every now and then, but anyhow, there's so many battles that we can get spread so thin that the left will win because we're spread out too much. And I know you're all going to be voting on your legislative agenda for this year, state legislature. I have found 4 to 8 issues. You got a big group, so you can do some more, but I would be careful. We got to get some victories, and we have been getting some victories. Catherine mentioned earlier, y'all did a great job last session, I know, because I was hearing from the politicians up there. They said, please have your folks stop calling us, and I said, no, I'm going to tell them to keep calling. Call more. But, so it was very effective, and we had the repeal, I'm drawing a blank here, the ethanol, thank you. Ethanol repeal, we had the drones bill wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. You know, it did add some restrictions that didn't exist before. But anyhow, you know, obviously there's 2 types of battles. One is offense, which is passing good legislation, and the other is we're on defense, and we're on defense way too much. And I'd like to see us start getting on offense more. As I said, we need to be on offense more, which means filing and working good legislation to restore our liberty and freedom. You know, some of the issues, bills, like there's one that's been filed that would stop, not really stop, but halt or slow down Common Core. Obviously, the Agenda 21 with private property rights. As I said, stopping the federal government's unconstitutional mandates, protecting our gun rights, banning red light cameras, are some of the, I think, the big issues, the ones that I really focus on. You may not know it, but you can actually file a bill in an indirect way. If you have a friendly legislator, which you all should get to know your district senator and your district representative very well, if you have a friendly legislator, they can put a bill into bill drafting. That's where a bill goes, and you can actually start with a paragraph. They do a great job. They will format the bill. You give them a concept, tell them basically what you're trying to accomplish with the bill. They'll put it into a bill. Now that legislator may or may not sponsor it, but they'll get it into bill drafting. I have 2 or 3 legislators that they put bills for me in bill drafting every year. Then it's my job or our job to go out and find a bill sponsor. But at the very least, we get it into bill drafting, because then we have a real bill. You know, legislators like to do the least amount of work they can. So if I can give them a bill that's coming out in bill drafting, all they have to do is put their name to it. It makes it a lot easier. Most of you know, House members are limited to filing 6 bills, not including memorials. Memorial bills are non-binding resolutions sent to Congress and the President. Warning. They will try to, if you got a gun issue or any kind of issue or standing up to the federal government, they don't want to do that, but they will file a memorial bill. And where we're going to say, we're not putting up with this anymore. It's just a memorial. It's just a resolution that has no meaning. So watch out, because they'll try to say we did something. Politicians up there are famous for saying, we did something. We heard you loud and clear, we're doing something. We filed a memorial. That's nothing. Don't let them do that. Typically, when trying to get a bill filed, so we've got a bill now, we got some language. It's a good bill, and I recommend, with a little caveat, is you need to secure a House sponsor first, mainly because they are limited to 6 bills. Now, on the Senate side, they're unlimited. They can file as many bills as they want. The only thing is, and this is what can happen now, a House member who's limited to 6 bills will ask you, do you have a Senate sponsor yet? And you go, no, I'm trying to make sure I have a House sponsor first. And they'll say, well, I want to make sure you have a Senate sponsor. So what you do is you get a commitment from the House person to sponsor the bill. Then you got to go shop it to a senator. And I'll tell you a quick story. I had a bill, I think it was 3 years ago, dealing with intrastate commerce, sort of similar to the Second Amendment Preservation Act that's being promoted right now. I got a House guy. I'm not going to say their name because they're actually doing a pretty good job for Liberty up there, so I don't want to embarrass them, but it's just sort of a funny how things work. He said, I'll file your bill, John, in the House. But he says, I want to make sure you have a Senate sponsor first so I don't waste one of my 6 slots. And I said, okay. And I ran over and I knew a senator, and the senator said, yeah, I like that. I'll file that bill. But I want to know that the House sponsor filed it first. I run back over to the House guy. I said, the Senate guy says he wants you to file first. He goes, no, I need to see the Senate guy file first before I file in the House. I'm going back over to the Senate. I said, Senator, the House representative said he wants you to file first. So this went on for days. I finally said, one of you has to do it. One of you has to call the other's bluff and actually file this bill. So that's some of the games that go on and some of the stuff. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. One of you just file it, the other one's already committed to do it, just do it. And they did. So the House guy finally gave in, filed the bill, and the Senate guy honored his commitment and did it. It's really important. You know, a lot of people go, we got a good bill, let's just get anybody in the legislature to file it, let's just get it filed. At least we have a bill filed. Well, that can be a problem. And it's really important, we have a good bill, to have a good bill sponsor. And they need to be absolutely committed, not to an institution, by the way. They need to be tough and focused on your issue. They need to know the procedures. And God bless the freshman representatives, they're in for their first term. And I know some good ones that are trying really hard. But if you got a good bill, don't give it to a first-term legislator. They don't know the process. They will be bullied and put down by leadership, and your bill will go nowhere. Rarely does a freshman legislator ever get a bill moving. Let me go back. A good spokesman, a good speaker, and a good staff. Some senators will have a really good staff, and I'll talk some more about the staff. They're called legislative aides. But having really good legislative aides that know what they're doing, they know the process, is important too. So a good sponsor doesn't guarantee victory, but a bad sponsor can pretty much guarantee defeat. And in my opinion, I'd rather not get a bill filed with a bad sponsor than just for the sake of getting it filed. I'd rather wait till the next session and get a good one. I've had this happen many times. Watch out for this. Some legislators will sponsor a bill and do nothing. They do it so they can say, I filed the bill. That's all they're going to do. They have no intention of pushing the bill, and that's where you go back to when that's committed to your issue, because if they're not, they're going to let it sit on their desk, and the bill's going to die. But you've got to have a bill sponsor that's going to be a champion for your bill. And I've seen too many legislators go, I'll file it, it'll look good. I filed a really good gun protection bill. It just didn't go anywhere, but I filed it, everybody should love me. Yeah. But that was their intention all along, was to take it and not do anything with it. Very crucial, as Paul knows, you have to work, when you have a good bill, you have to work with your bill sponsor all the time. You need to provide them talking points. As Paul knows, when we get a bill moving, like with red light cameras, they're constantly calling Paul and going, Paul, give me some information, give me some talking points, because they're going to go present it to a committee, and that's where Paul comes in on red light cameras, and it's just really important that we give them, they don't need to be researching talking points, they got a lot to do, we got to do that. Always, communicate with your bill sponsor on strategy. Don't do an end around them, make sure that what you're doing jives with what they're trying to do. And you got to stay with the bill sponsor. You got to make sure they're pushing your bill, because if they don't push it, nobody else will. Even if we're making the phone calls for a bill, if the bill sponsor is not requesting that the chairman of the committee take the bill up, it won't happen. So you got to stay on top of your bill sponsor. Getting co-sponsors for a bill, I do it as part of my daily practice. But I've seen a bill with 50 co-sponsors never get heard in a committee, and I've seen a bill with no co-sponsors run through, sail through, and get passed. So it's not necessary, but it's something to do. So again, bill sponsors, they have a lot of duties during the session. They serve on several committees. They're going to have to review hundreds of bills. They serve on 3 or 4 committees, and out of 2,000 bills, they got a bunch of those that they have to know, understand. They're going to be debating in committee. They have their other bills that they sponsored. So it can become very difficult for a bill sponsor to do what we need them to do to push our bill. So we have to become an assistant to the bill sponsor. And this is something that Paul and I do all the time. So we're finding co-sponsors, great. Meeting with committee staff. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Each committee has its professional staff. What the committee does, or the committee staff, will review a bill. They're legal experts, and they'll do a whole analysis of a bill. Very important to read the committee staff analysis as you track bills. But they can also kill your bill, and you may not even know why until you talk to them. You need to promote your bill to the other committee members. So you got a committee of, say, 10 legislators, you got to promote it to all of them, so you're lobbying to get the other committee members to support it. It really becomes a daily management during the session. There's all kinds of landmines and things you're going to have to constantly look out for. So it's just really a daily management. And really knowing the political landscape is crucial. You got to know who and when to communicate to. Not only who, but when. Timing's everything. Knowing which elected or appointed official to contact for specific issues. Again, a lot of the committee staff and reviewing the information for a bill. Knowing people and personalities, party leaders, committee chairpersons and their staff. These are all people that are going to affect the life of a bill. You need to know all the possible impediments, such as other lobbying organizations opposing our bill. As I mentioned, objections by committee staff, objections by leadership. We see a bill just stagnate and not even go anywhere. It's just sitting in committee. We keep wondering why isn't the bill moving? And a lot of times it could be any of these people. Leadership doesn't want it to happen. Thank you. Lobbying isn't just about contacting elected or non-elected officials. As I said, it's about contacting the right people and knowing when to contact them. Important rule, if people call about a bill and it's not scheduled for a vote, this is during session, is a waste of your valuable time. Because they have bills that they're going to be voting on in committee all through the session pretty much. And if you call about a bill that's just sitting, hasn't been brought up and agendaed yet, they don't want to hear it. It's a waste of time. Don't even bother. They're not going to acknowledge anything you said about that bill because it's not up. I'll only talk about the bills that have been placed on agenda. So again, knowing the players, all these people can kill your bill. Leadership, which is the speaker, the president, the majority leader, the majority whip, committee chairs, the committee members. Legislative staff can kill your bill. They work for the senators and representatives, and they look to a lot of these legislative aides for advice. They make sure they're on board. Obviously, other lobbyists and trade organizations that would oppose your bill. Many times I've had bills that I was told that another lobbying group had a problem with it. I went ahead, instead of batting heads with them, I went over and asked them what the problem was. And sometimes it's real minor. Sometimes it's, okay, it's not going to hurt the integrity of the bill. If that's your only problem, we'll fix that, and we'll move on. And then they withdraw their opposition. All of a sudden, the bill's moving again. So, you know, I want to know. I don't want to just yell and scream at them. I want to know why they have a problem with my bill. Again, this is sort of standard stuff. You probably know each bill is referred to, usually 2 to 4 committees. The chairs will decide when a bill is heard with heavy influence of leadership. Chair can vary the bill, which is very common. They say the committee process is the graveyard of bills. There's 2,000 bills, only 200 usually get passed. That means they're going to kill a lot of bills, and that's their job, to find a reason to kill bills. So, you know, that makes it difficult right there. Target and utilize your activities and activism to the committee that the bill is in. You know, there again, you're not going to call a committee that's down the road. You're going to call a committee that's in environmental protection. You're going to call that committee and not any other committees. Just focus on the committee that the bill is sitting in. If you get a bill passed through, one good thing to know is if we can get it passed through one committee, it's technically alive, even if it's not being brought up. We can use rules and procedures and bring it to the floor. It's a lot of work. You got to get the other chairs of the committees to sign off. It's not easy, but it's alive. Get it passed through one committee keeps your bill alive. As I said, bypassing committee references requires the chairs to have to sign off. We have to get our bill moving, so that means we need to put pressure on the committee chair as well as leadership. Very important. You all may know this. If leadership, in this case Will Weatherford, let's say in the House, if he doesn't want to see a bill move, it's not moving. It's dead. It's that simple. If Will Weatherford does not want to see a bill moved, it will not move. End of story. Okay? So do we give up? You know, although it takes leadership to get a bill moving, what I do, instead of trying to lobby Will Weatherford real hard, which I would do, we'll make calls, we'll call Will Weatherford as Speaker of the House, but I'll see if I can get the chair on board to lobby Will Weatherford. I'll see if I can get the committee members to go to Will Weatherford. If we put pressure on the committee members and the committee chair, they will go to Will Weatherford and go, I am taking heat. You got to help me, Will. I'm getting phone calls. I'm getting hammered. We got to schedule this bill. And Will Weatherford go, oh, okay. You know, so, you know, we concentrate too many times on the Senate President or the Speaker of the House, but sometimes you got to lobby those that lobby him. You know, so kind of work backwards a little bit. Many bills will stall because I talked about this. The committee staff has a problem. I've seen, 2 years ago, a bill moved and then all of a sudden it stalled, and I'm going to find out why. You know, so I'm asking everybody, and I finally found out from the legislative staff person that, well, they didn't like one sentence in the bill, and so I have to run down to the committee staff if they're in another part of the Capitol and meet with them. I go, what's your problem with the bill? And they said, well, this, therefore, you know, and shall instead of, you know, will. And I said, really, that's it? And that's it. I said, well, if I can get that changed, you'll be good with it? Yeah. So sometimes it's not, sometimes it's real simple. You got to talk to committee staff because Paul knows, right? Paul, I mean, they'll kill your bill in a heartbeat. Paul goes and talks to the, you know the DMV guy, I probably sent him a Christmas card by now, you know him so well. So many times the problem can be fixed. Just like with other lobbyists, with committee staff, with all the people, with all the impediments to a bill, sometimes if you work it hard enough, it can be fixed. When you're trying to get a bill moving, let's say in the House it's moved through 2 or 3 committees or 2 committees and it's stalled out in the Senate. This could be a reverse. But when I have a bill and it's passed through a couple of committees in the House and is sitting still in the Senate, I'll spend all my time getting it to move in the Senate. I'll let the House go for now, because it's already moved through a couple of committees. So that means we need to utilize our efforts and our time over in the House where it's, whatever it is, it's not moving. How good bills can go bad. Once we have a good bill, we got it filed, all of a sudden, all these outside groups and all these outside lobbyists are going to fly in to the sponsor, and they're going to start proposing amendments. They're going to have committee members proposing amendments even to the sponsor, have them do amendments to their own bill. They feel like parts of it might hurt them. They want to be exempted. We were talking earlier about the open carry bill from a couple of years ago with Greg Evers. That thing got watered down and watered down and watered down and watered down, more amendments and more amendments, and it just destroyed the open carry part of the bill. The drones bill last year. There again, the Sheriff's Department lobbyists came in, and all these lobbyists came in, and that's too restrictive. We need to be able to use drones to save little kids lost in the woods, and anyhow, they started watering down that bill. So it's just something that you have to fight. You have a good bill, they're going to try to destroy it with amendments. So we've got to stay on top of the amendments. Read the bill and all the amendments. Sometimes bills will have a nice sound to them, and I'll tell you about one in a minute, you may remember. And again, watch out for the amendments. One amendment can destroy a bill, a good one. Either prior to a committee meeting or during the presentation of the bill, members of the committee may submit amendments. This is just your procedural stuff, adding language, deleting language, striking and inserting language. This is one, is sort of a side note, it's funny to me. An amendment to the amendment, which can be the amendment to the amendment to the amendment to the amendment. When a bill comes up in committee meeting and I'm sitting here waiting, I may only have one bill I'm working. I got to sit there for 3 or 4 hours to wait for my bill to come up. And I'm sitting there listening to these other bills, and they're bringing up, okay, we got HB 53. First, we're going to hear an amendment. Okay, there's an amendment to the amendment. Oh, wait a minute, there's an amendment to the amendment to the amendment. Then we work back from the amendment. Now we're back on the second amendment to the amendment. Okay, wait a minute, now we're on the amendment as changed, as amended, this will drive you nuts. And so I just think it's funny. It's not that you need to know this, it's just crazy to me because I have to sit through this every day up there. Good to know a bad amendment in one committee. Don't panic. If we work hard, we can get it off in the next committee stop. You can always get it removed. An amendment to remove an amendment. And we need to, and this is where Paul Henry came in, you heard about his RFID stopping. We need to alert the amendment sponsor that we have a problem with the language. Just because a House sponsor puts an amendment that we see is bad, don't scream and yell at them yet. Maybe later, but not now. First, we alert them. And that goes to the story about Paul Henry. There was a somewhat innocuous transportation bill, no biggie, done every year. But there was an amendment that would have, as Catherine said, would have put an RFID chip in the driver's licenses. So Paul went to that sponsor of the amendment and explained it to him. He goes, no, I didn't want to do that. No, that's bad, that's bad. He withdrew the amendment. I think it took the whole bill down, didn't it? Yeah, one whole section of the bill, because Paul did his job. He didn't go yell and scream at the sponsor of the amendment. He went and said, you know what you just did. He goes, no, I didn't realize that, because some lobbyists handed it to him. They write the bills and they write the amendments. So always, let the legislator, if a legislator sponsors a bad bill, we'll go to them and tell them why we have a problem with the bill. Not time to scream and yell yet. Now, there may be a time when it's time to scream and yell, but at that point, we're going to let them know that we have a problem with the bill and start there first. Somebody mentioned earlier about the strike-all amendments, just another interesting thing. A bill can be moving, maybe a few amendments, it's going down, it's going through some committees, and then all of a sudden, they go, we're going to do a strike-all amendment, which just takes the whole language of the bill out and puts in new language, and you're thinking like, I just worked this bill through for the last 2 months and stopped some bad amendments, you know, and did what I could. I got a couple of good amendments on, and now you're going to do a strike-off, and it's just like writing a whole new bill. But the bill doesn't have to necessarily go back to any committees. There can be several bills filed dealing with a specific issue. The septic tank issue, y'all remember from a couple of years ago, there was probably about 15 bills that dealt with it. So when you're trying to repeal that regulation on septic tanks, man, I had to track, just for that one issue, I had to track about a dozen bills. Because if one was dying, another one was picking it up. So, you know, it's constantly, you got to find out where all these, whether if you're fighting for an issue, you know, Common Core is probably going to be, has been done in many different bills every session. And then the train bandwagon bills, that's just another one where a transportation bill or an environmental bill where they're going to put a whole bunch of issues going to move into one bill. Transportation's famous for that. The second reading on so once a bill has passed all its committee stops, is then put on the House calendar, but that does not mean it's going to get heard. It has to be scheduled by the Rules and Calendar Committee on something called special order. So if you're tracking a bill and you're going, oh, it passed its committee, so I see it's on the House calendar, you know, alert everybody. No, not yet. Because there again, if you're going to call about it, it's not out, it has to be on special order calendar. So just remember that, special order calendar. Then you can alert, have everybody start calling, because it's probably up the next day. But until then, it's not up and nobody wants to hear about it. Then it's gone through its second reading, so on special order, it's been heard. You'll hear the term after the second reading, and there's debate and amendments can be added. They'll say we're rolling it over the third reading, which is usually the next day. And that's when you'll have the final vote, debate and final vote on the bill. Just as we talked a lot about amendments, rare to add amendments on third reading. So if you're trying to get some language added to a bill or taken off, it's probably too late at that point. Real quickly, conference committees. On bills that they have to do or required by the Constitution to do, the Florida Constitution, they can't come to an agreement. They have a House bill and a Senate bill. They can't come to any agreement. They go into joint conference. That's where they'll hammer it out, negotiate it, and then send it back to both houses to be voted on. Okay, so the bill's passed, and it goes to the governor. It's called, the bill is considered enrolled, and then engrossed in its final form. So you may have heard that term, enrolled. The bill is enrolled means it's passed, it's been certified, it's headed over to the governor. As you know, the governor approves and signs the bill, it becomes law. If he fails to do anything, he can either sign it, veto it, or do nothing. If he does nothing in the time frame, it becomes law. He has 7 days during session if he receives a bill on his desk. After the session is over, he has 15 days to make that decision. Sign it, veto it, do nothing. And then the legislature has the ability to override a veto by the governor by a 2/3 vote of both houses. If he vetoes a bill during the session, they have until the end of the session to vote for an override. If he vetoes a bill after the session's over, actually by the rules and regulations, they have until the end of the following session to vote to veto the bill. Some real important things that y'all familiar with myFloridaHouse.gov, FLSenate.gov. Crucial. If you're tracking bills and you're wanting to stay on top of everything, those are your two websites you have to go to. You have to learn how to use them. If you go to myFloridaHouse.gov, and up at the top you'll see legislative bill tracking. Crucial, do this. Once you've found out from everybody, and they said that bill's bad or that bill's good, you log it in, you create your own account, and every time an amendment's added or it's in a committee or about to come up in a committee, you'll get a notice in your email box. It's a really good tool. Recommended highly if you want to get into tracking bills. Got to do it. So now as you're tracking a bill, let's say you have a bill you're following, and so you go to flsenate.gov or My Florida House, you put in the say bill number, you put the bill number up, and things you need to, on a whole web page comes out on the bill. One of the first things it's going to tell you is the committees that it was referred to. Like this particular bill, Civil Justice Subcommittee, Justice Appropriations, Judiciary, and Appropriations, in the order of which they have to be heard. Now when you're following on this page, when it comes up in the Civil Justice Subcommittee, when it's scheduled an agenda, it will show right under it the day that it's coming up will be heard. So this is you got to follow this. And then you need to know the related bills. Remember I told you an issue can cover, many bills can cover one issue. So in that page of the bill will be related bills. And it will tell you all the bills, whether it's in the House or in the Senate, that are related in some way to a bill. And you got to know that, there again, because if Common Core is failing in one bill, they'll move it over to another bill. And I got to know which bill that is so I can stop that bill. And related bills are considered similar, identical, or comparable. Watch similar and comparable bills, because as I was just telling you, these are bills that you have to know. Because the bad language from a bill that may be dying, we're happy it's dying, but they're going to take that language and move it over to a similar or identical or comparable bill. Bill text. This is really important. As the bill goes through, this is sort of chronological, starting with the last event, which this particular bill was enrolled, which means it passed and was going to the governor. But committee substitute too. Now, as bills get amended, they're going to get changed. Remember, the amendments are going to change the intent of the bill. So you've got to read every time it's changed, it becomes a committee substitute. So you'll see CS, HB, you'll see CS for committee substitute. You got to read, as it's changed, you got to read it because it really can change. And then as a bill is moving in committee, it's up the next day, they'll put amendments on it. So I got to read the amendments for that bill. Got to see what these legislators are trying to do to me. So this is an important area. Bill text, you got to read the bill, you got to read the committee staff analysis, you got to read them as they change after they're amended, become committee substitutes. Staff analysis. This is like a summary of what the bill is. Please do this. They're nonpartisan. I found them to be very professional. They're not out to really destroy a bill, although they can. So go to staff analysis on a bill, and as the bill moves, as it's amended, it will change. So the Appropriations Committee will do a staff analysis. Then there'll be the final bill analysis before it goes to the floor to be voted on. Again, read the staff analysis. It's not a whole ton of reading. Probably in about 10 pages, we'll tell you about the bill. And this is what I'm talking about. Committees publish objective bill analysis, which professional staff research and prepare. Bill analysis gives background information regarding the current statutes. It documents the changes the bill proposes and summarizes the possible effects. I'm going to reemphasize, we got to read this. I'm constantly every day reading, staff analysis. There again, you got a bill you're pushing, you're going to find out why they have an objection to your bill. So, really crucial. Then the vote history, that's going to tell you that, in the committee vote, it was voted. This is a final vote taken on April 26, 34 to 74 in the Senate. You want to pull it up, highlight it, because it will tell you who voted for it or against it. And this is how we're going to start holding them accountable, right, on their votes. So this is really crucial. Paul and I are putting together right now a scorecard of the last session so you can know what you need to know. Who voted for your bill, who voted against your bill, and let them know in the election. Bill history will tell you everything that's happened. This bill was filed on Thursday, January 3rd by Representative Pasadomo. It was scheduled in committee on April 3rd and appropriations. Anyhow, this tells you the history of the bill, where it is, how many committees it's gone through. So it's really, this is all part of, tracking bills. If you really want to get into the weeds on this, is you start keeping up with the statutes that a bill will change in some way. Like SB 1666 last year on the mortgage foreclosure issue. You can see here, citations, same thing as statutes, which is the laws, in the books. Chapter 121.091, benefits payable under the system. This gets really, tricky because there again, if they're trying to move language from a bad bill, I need to know the statutes that it covers. That tells me the bills that they could move it to. I have to track all the bills because, as Paul found out, an innocuous transportation bill can have a bad amendment added, or FID chip. So Paul and I are always tracking all the bills because we don't know when they're going to try to sneak something bad in the middle of the night, on a late filed amendment, and trying to get it on a bill that nobody's really paying attention to. So, I know this is a lot of stuff for most people, but it's really important. So staying on top of the amendments, and sometimes they're filed within hours. They can be late filed if 2/3 of the committee approve it, but typically they file it by 5 o'clock of the day before, so it's still short notice. Amendments we can use for our cause. Everything that the enemy's doing to us on our good bills, we can be doing too. So, Paul and I are always constantly looking for amendment language and looking for a bill. That goes back to statutes. We got to know which bills Paul and I can go after a bill and try to get an amendment added to it. The Trojan Horse Bill in 2011, SB 736. I'm sorry, that should be SB. I'm sorry, that's a typo. SB 736. It was called the Teacher Merit Pay Bill, and they were touting it as this big slam against the teachers union. We're going to take away, tenure and go with merit pay. So I read the staff analysis. I went, not much mention of merit, but there was mentioned about 50 times race to the top. You all know what race to the top is? That bill was to implement, to sign on to race to the top, which is why we have Common Core today. That bill that was being touted as a slam against the teachers union was nothing more than implementing, it was a fraud and it's disgusting. They should be ashamed of themselves for that bill. Okay, here's something that I saw last year. Sometimes alerts would go out, stop, HB 732, whatever it is, dealing with some issue that I agree we need to stop, except why are we going to spend a lot of time and our effort trying to stop a bill that is not going to be hurt, it's dead. So how do you know it's dead bill? Because we don't need to worry about it for now. Let's devote our attention to what's active and what's moving. Because the time constraints of a 60-day session, if a bill and its companion are not making their way through the committee process at approximately the same pace, it's highly unlikely that bill will become law. So what I'm going to look for, if it has more than four committee references, that means the Speaker or the Senate President wanted the bill to die. You can't get a bill through more than 4 committees. You're lucky if you can do that. If a bill doesn't have a companion in the other house, the other chamber, it's not going to happen. If a bill's not been heard in committee yet, here's a biggie. Here's a big clue. If the bill doesn't have a staff analysis, it hasn't been heard in committee, it doesn't have an analysis that you can go look up, they're not moving. If a bill's going to move, the committee staff has to do an analysis. So if it doesn't have one, it's not moving. So you got to learn at some point, we don't need to worry about some of these bills. I was getting alerts last year, and I said, that bill is not going anywhere. Why are we spending all of our time on it? So you got to know when a bill's dead. Let's not waste any more time on it. You got to know deadlines. Bills have to be filed or be sponsored by the first day of session, but that's not the important date. The important date is the bill drafting deadline. Because any bill you can't file one. It has to be that's why it's so important to get a bill into bill drafting. So we get it into bill drafting, which the deadline is usually about the third week in January. So the session starts March 5th. About third week in January is the cutoff. You got to have a bill into bill drafting. So that's why we always want to get a friendly legislator, even if they're not going to sponsor, let's get them to get it into the bill draft. That gives us till the first day of session to find a sponsor. So you got to know that deadline. I had somebody tell me, he said, John, you're sending these alerts out. You're only giving me a day or two to make the calls. Just give me more time. Give me a couple of weeks. I said, well, first of all, the committees only have to give a 48-hour notice of when they're going to have their committee meeting and what bills are going to be heard. And after the last 15 days, it's only a 24-hour notice. So I'm sorry, but that's all I had was a 2-day notice. Timely file amendments have to be done by technically 6 p.m. the day before. So there again, that night, I know a bill's coming up the next day in committee, and Paul and I are scouring the amendments because they'll be up on that myfloridahouse.gov. So he and I are scouring the amendments for some bad language. I get asked this a lot, for those that love parliamentary procedures. They use the Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure instead of like the Robert's Rules of Order. Not important to me, but a lot of people ask that question. Although in the rule book for the House, the rulings of the Speaker are first. He's a dictator. Whatever he says goes. Remember I told you that? If he doesn't want a bill to move, it's not moving. A little bit about rules and procedures. 2/3 and 3/5 are important on many different things in the rules and procedures. You need 80 seats for 2/3 and 72 seats in the House for 3/5. In the last election, 2012, they lost. They had a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. They lost it, and that's why the ALEC bill got defeated, because of that. They didn't have 2/3. 27 seats needed for 2/3 in the Senate, 24 seats needed for 3/5. They only have 24, so they lost their 2/3. Again, that's why that ALEC bill was defeated. If you have the 2/3, it's kind of nice. You can sidestep a lot of the rules and procedures, considering bills that aren't on the calendar. You can bring a bill, like I said, if it's passed one committee and still alive, if you have 2/3, you can bring it up to the floor and vote on it. Pulling the bill that's been sitting in committee, taking up amendments that have been filed after a deadline. There's a lot of neat things. If you're the majority party, that you can do 2/3 that the Republicans no longer have. The 2/3 override a veto. The Republicans still have 3/5, but that means they can't have more than 3 or 4 Republicans. It's a lot more work to keep them all together. I can tell you from experience, they're not always unified. There's some maverick Republicans in a bad way. Sometimes I like maverick Republicans, but sometimes they're not in a good way. You need a 3/5 if you want to add a constitutional amendment to the ballot. To be effective during the session, we must start our efforts early. Everybody says, geez, you got a good job, John. You work 2 months of the year. I said, really? I didn't know that. I said, once the session is over, in some ways the next session has started. In an off-election year, they're filing bills in June. They're discussing bills, filing bills in June. And they'll start the early committee weeks here in another 10 days and running through. So what I need for all of you to do is to be visiting your state legislators in their home districts over the summer. That's when you can do a lot of good work, stopping Common Core, stopping Agenda 21. That's when they're not as busy and you can educate them a little bit on the issues and make sure they understand what you want. Another rule is the earlier a bill is filed, the better chance we have of getting, if we get a bill filed now, we have a better chance of getting it passed. If we wait till the deadline in January, it's tough sledding. Effective lobbying is done 365 days a year. That's just the way it is. So there is no risk for the weary. And that's that. I'm sorry?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
Part of your presentation, you mentioned that a bill goes into messages. You actually did not define messages.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. When a bill passes, let's say a House passes a bill, there's a companion bill in the Senate. I'm sorry, can you hear me? There's a companion bill in the Senate, and the companion bill, which means, I didn't mention, but for a bill to eventually pass, there has to be a House bill and a Senate bill exactly identical. They have to match them up. You know, so the House can't pass a bill if the Senate doesn't have a companion bill exactly like it. So what will happen is the House will pass a bill and they'll send it over to the Senate in messages. That's when the House passes a bill, there's a companion bill sitting over there, they'll send it over in messages, okay? And what they'll do, if the House sends it over first, the Senate will then schedule the Senate bill, the companion bill, up on special order calendar. What they typically do, since the House has already passed it, they'll take up the House bill and they'll lay the Senate bill on what they call laid on the table, and they'll replace it with the House bill. It's kind of complicated. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is some kind of bill being trying to push through policy or fix the change in the process that we use on our bill? Because, well, after all, the amendments to a bill and those who do it, it's just like good.
Well, technically by rules and procedures, an amendment to a bill has to be what's called germane. You know, germanity, it has to deal with, supposedly, with the issue at hand, with the bill. Whatever the bill says, the amendment has to deal with that. It has to be germane. But they get, they skirt around that a lot, you know.
And this whole lobbying process, is there any way that you can
Yeah, but, right. Right. I mean, lobbying itself is guaranteed in the Constitution, the First Amendment. Okay, so what the problem is we've granted government way too much power. They have to control way too much money. If we downsize government, we downsize lobbyist influence. And one of the things we could stop is the leadership in both parties have what's called leadership funds. This is a slush fund. It's money that big, wealthy, well-connected people and lobbyists can contribute a lot of money, unlimited amounts, to the speaker and to the president. And guess what? Their bill gets passed. It's a big surprise. So those are the things we need to stop. Yeah, and we need to stop, and we need to downsize the size of government, because lobbyists only go there because that's where all the money is. There's $75 billion being spent every year in Tallahassee. So it's like an ATM machine. These lobbyists are running up there with their ATM card trying to get as much cash as they can out of that $75 billion. But, okay. Absolutely. The fact that the Republican Party, let me tell you something, they don't like you, they don't like us, they do badmouth you, but they want you during the election, so they want you. But what they can't stand is that you're voicing your opinions during the session. So yes, congratulations, you're irritating them, please continue. Please do. John.
Just because your senator tells you he voted against that bill on the floor, that may be true. But your senator can be in committee and have voted for that exact same bill twice
Sure.
to get it there.
Sure, you want...
Voted for it in the end, no, but he's telling you.
He allowed it to move, yeah. That's why you track the votes. When the committee votes, you can go the next day and see the votes on MyFlorida or flsenate.gov. Yes, sir? Great. Right, right. One more? I'm sorry. I'll be here, and Paul and I are going to be back up talking again at 2 o'clock, so we'll talk some more about that.
And he'll be here at lunchtime.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.